We can't forget him, because he won't let us. Brother Bill.
Yeah, he wants to know that he's waving at us and stuff, so.
If we don't, he will question us.
I know.
We're on Exodus 20, and like I said, it's 24 pages of commentary, but it's about 24, 25 verses. There's just lots in the lesson tonight. We're not going to go through all of it because it just takes too long to read. But that's why I gave it out, and you can take a look at it. And there's a lot of interesting things in here. It goes back into some of the Mosaic law and a lot of the history of the Jews. Is in Exodus 20:1, after last week going through and going up to the mountain, remember, and he had to come back down. God told him to go back down to the mountain, tell them, hey, don't pass this barrier. They made some kind of barrier around the back of the mountain. And then he took him and his brother Aaron, and they went back up to the mountain to God. And as he got up there, verse 1 says, and God spoke all these words, saying. Okay? And we don't know. We do know the first time when he went up, the people heard God's words. Now, whether that continued as they came back down and the people heard the words, it may have very well been. I could easily see that happen, that he said these very same things and the people heard them and understood. So he answered Moses by voice, and Moses heard him. Here it says, there God answered him by voice as Moses stood among the people at the foot of Mount Sinai. And I don't know how long that continued. It may have gone through this whole chapter or even a little further. We don't know exactly. The commentary has some views on it, but in letter B there it says the following laws were not invented at Mount Sinai. Okay? Back in Adam and Eve, when they sinned, they knew it right away. When Cain killed Abel, he knew it right away. He knew it was wrong because he asked him, where is your brother? God asked him, where is your brother? Am I my brother's keeper? He doesn't answer the question. So he knew it was wrong. So these things, as we're getting ready to go through them, we talked about last week being written in our heart under grace. They are still there. It's still a moral law that God put in our hearts. Now, we can continually break that law, and we ignore it. It no longer becomes, to us, a meaningful law. But back then, they knew this and they recognized this, that these things were set up. This is just setting down these 10 laws in stone, so they would remember them. Abraham had already set up. He had made sacrifices. Okay, Noah made sacrifices after he came off the ark. A lot of people said, well, it was invented, at Mount Sinai. No, it wasn't. It was invented a long time ago. God put this in the hearts of, even back then, Adam and Eve and all the descendants from there. Now, as they grew worse and worse and sinned more and more until Noah's time, they were ignoring it because sin had come up to God. It said it raised up to God, and God said, hey, I'm done with it. We're going to destroy the world by water. Told Noah what to do and went on about his business. But man continually, and it's not that he failed or God didn't see that coming. He put this in their hearts to show them. And he repeated it again. He gave them another chance. You can serve me again from Noah on. But right after that, what happened? Noah got drunk. I mean, I'm not saying, but he did. And bad things happened after that. So it seems to be in man's, because of Adam and Eve, that free will is just too much for us to contain almost. We want to do our own thing. It's wrong to steal, murder, or covet, not because these sins are forbidden by the Decalogue, which is another name for the Ten Commandments. They are forbidden because they were previously forbidden by conscience, and that's just what I was trying to say, some of the commentators said. One of the things, and one of my favorite authors is C.S. Lewis, and it says in his book, The Abolition of Man, Lewis explained there certainly is a universal morality among men. He gave concrete examples of how all cultures in the past were able to agree on the basics of morality, because these principles are implanted in the heart and mind of mankind. And if you haven't read that book, it's a great read. C.S. Lewis, and if you don't know him, he wrote the Chronicles of Narnia, a children's series, but it's very, very good. And he wrote a bunch of other books too. He's an English scholar and was basically an atheist for most of his life until right at the end he became a believer in Christ, and he became one of the staunchest pushing the envelope, writing about his feelings. He had many things that happened to him in his life, and he just about any book he has, if you want to read it, it'll give you some insight to how he thought, of course, and how he sees God, and how people ought to serve God. And he makes very good examples easily. All cultures have said murder is wrong and kindness is good. All agree that we have particular obligations to our family. All say that honesty is good and that a man cannot have any woman he wants. They agree that stealing is wrong and justice is good. There are no cultures where cowards are good and bravery is bad. But we see that a lot today. It happened in the Bible. We see that, but they're breaking the law, God's law, and their quote conscience. Okay. We're going to skip on. You can read on down through here where it compares some of the things with the Ten Commandments. But on page 3, it says the Ten Commandments and all the law of Moses that follows is a God-based moral code. It doesn't just say that certain behavior is unwise or unhelpful. It says that God commands us to do or not do certain things, and it either says or implies these things. God sees our obedience or our disobedience. He measures our obedience or disobedience, and God in some way rewards our obedience and punishes our disobedience. Okay? Without this God-based moral code, it's difficult or basically impossible to answer the question why in response to any moral demand. When somebody asks you, why is it wrong to steal? I had a teacher, a religious teacher. It was a religious class. It's the first 3 books of the New Testament, the Semantic, is that what they call it? Semantic Gospels. They're Matthew, Mark, and Luke are all very similar. And so we studied those 3. And one of the things he said in that, he posed the question to us, and he thought it was fine. If a mother and her child needed bread, if she stole it, it was okay, because the child was starving. That's a moral dilemma, I will agree with you. But there should be some other things. What's happening, why is she not working or not getting some kind of compensation? All these things. But that just tells you how the morals of this world has gone, that it's okay. We see today, the people up in Portland and Oregon, they say, hey, if they're rioting and taking stuff, it's okay. It's no big deal. As long as it's under $1,000, it's, quote, not a felony, it's okay. You got insurance. That's what they tell them. That's just wrong. I don't care if you take a candy bar. It's just wrong. And that's where we are today in a lot of places and a lot of societies. Now here in Oklahoma, it's a little different than that. They still, I think for the most part, most of us still believe that it's wrong to take things. We see every day, though, the police is putting out bulletins. Have you seen this person? They just took, so-and-so from this grocery store, or, wheeled out a wheelbarrow full of this stuff. And it just, we're just getting more and more as a nation away from God. And I'm going to skip on. You can read this next one about Ted Turner, and it's good, but I mean, it's interesting. It's not good that he said that, but he has some enlightening things. His 10 suggestions, instead of 10 commandments.
Sure glad that wasn't in place.
Yeah, that's right. So I'm going to jump on down, and we're going to go on into the words. It's going to go all the way over to the bottom of page 6. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Okay, this is the first commandment. It's telling us you're not going to have anybody else. I am God. It's me that you serve. It's nobody else. You shouldn't have any other gods before me. Egypt had their gods, as we saw in the early part of Exodus. All down through there, the Sumerians and all the others they've had. We know today, historically, that different people, different societies had different gods that they served. The Romans, the Greeks, all these things. This is what separates the Jewish people early on from all the rest of the world. They're saying there is only one God. And God, He is the God of the universe, the God that created the universe. In this part it says God is above nature. A lot of people want to make nature the God. God is personal, and God is good, and God is holy. All those things go up to make our God who He is. I mean, He is who He is. We have to try to recognize that. So many times we have a hard time because we feel like that's not fair. Well, I'm sorry. We didn't get to make the rules. God made the rules. And He tells us in here a little bit, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage? Before God commanded anything of Israel, He reminded them what He had done for them. He caused the plagues to come, He caused the Red Sea to part, all these things He had done, and He's reminding them. Said God's blessings are binders. Every deliverance is a tie to obedience. The first commandment logically flowed from understanding who God was and what He had done for Israel. Because of that, nothing was to come before God. He was the only God we worship and serve. And it goes through and tells a bunch of the deities that was serving. And they think maybe possibly John Calvin said this, that human nature is like an idol factory that operates constantly. We constantly deal with the temptation to set all kinds of things before us, competing with God and His preeminent place in our lives. You can go talk to a kid. What does a kid want to be? He wants to be a policeman or fireman. Used to be. I don't know what they want to be now. They're putting them up on a pedestal. And that's rightly so. We need some role models. But we don't need to let that get too far. We do that in our own lives if we're not careful. We start to idolize actors, movie stars, athletes, celebrities, whoever. And we may not have a, quote, idol, but how many pictures of them do we have now? A kid or whatever. That's the way you can tell. Seems like to me what they want, what they concentrate on, or what their thoughts on. No other gods before me. This does not imply that it's permissible to have other gods, as long as they line up behind the true God. Instead, the idea is there are no other gods before the sight of the true God in our life. And it says, before me is literally to my face. There's no other God that can stand up to my face. You know, all the ones that we go through and all the religions that they have, none of them put up to, God says in the very beginning when Moses asked him, who shall I tell him? He says, I am. And we need to understand what that phrase means. Before anything, there was God. He made the material that started the world. You know, we went to that ark, and one of the curator or the originator, one of the founders was there, and he was saying, he was working with the Bill Nye the Science Guy, debating. Mm-hmm. And he said, okay, you think there's a Big Bang Theory. What constituted the Big Bang? You know, where did all that material come from? Well, I don't know. It was just there. No, it had to come from somewhere. You know, I mean, it just you just start logically thinking through these things, and it's like creation is the only thing that you can't believe. Now, you have to have faith with it, for sure. But without any, you know, to believe that amoeba, the Big Bang happened, and then an amoeba was somehow started, and from that, mankind came, that's just, to me, that's ludicrous. So, anyway, let's go on. Like I said, it's a lot of verbiage, but and not too many scriptures, but you can really talk a lot on it. 4 through 6. Will you read that for us, Iris?
Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven images or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water underneath, under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them, for I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me, and showing mercy unto thousands of them that love me and keep my commandments.
Okay. It's hitting on the first one. First of all, there's only one true God. I'm the God. And second of all, don't make any graven images. Graven images is one that you form with your hands. Whether it's mud, clay, steel, whatever it is. Don't make something out of an image. So many times that's what the people did in Egypt. They had these gods that were, you know, head of a dog and body of this and all different types, you know. Who knows where they got that from? I'm sure that somebody probably knows, but they had to carve that. They started serving that. He's telling them, don't do that. Don't make a graven image. Later on, he tells them to make and we'll study this a little bit later, but make a bronze serpent and raise it up so the people can see it. And once they see it, they will be healed. They had to be careful, because that's not saying that that serpent healed them. God told them to do that. But that's only one time that we ever see that an image was formed. God told them to form this image. Later on, he did tell them to show the image of the cherubim over when they built the Ark of the Covenant. Because some people worship angels as God, they will build these angels of what they think they are, you know, from the descriptions we see in the Bible and the historical letters that they have, books. They will build images to them, and they pray to those images. That's God's telling them, it's not right. Don't do that. So don't bow down and don't serve them anything that is likeness in the heaven above or below, whether it's of water, earth, whatever it is. Don't worship a tree. Don't worship any image. Because he said, I am the Lord your God, I am a jealous God. Jealous a lot of times has a bad meaning, so maybe change that J to a Z. Zealous God. I am zealous for you. And if you have other things that's in your life, I can't help you as far as you're not going to be worshiping me all the time like you need to be. And it says in the last part, this does not mean when visiting the iniquity of the fathers of the children on the third and fourth generation, doesn't mean that God punishes people for the sins of their ancestors. The important words are of those who hate me. When somebody hates me, when somebody hates a person, whether it's a neighbor or whoever, that usually gets passed down to the children. They absorb that. They hear. They get that same feeling that you have. You may not be pushing that on them, but they do. And it just continues on. So those descendants that love God, they will not have the iniquity of the fathers on them, visited on them, if they love God. If there's hate in there, that's going to disrupt that pattern. And it's going to be absorbed, if you want to say it that way. Children who repeat the sins of their father evidence it in personally hating God. Hence, they too are punished like their fathers. That's another way that I was trying to say that. It's possible for everyone to receive God's mercy, but they have to turn to Him in love and obedience. Bertha, read verse 7. Exodus 20 and 7. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless that taketh his name in vain.
Okay. There's other ways besides profanity. It has profanity here, but it's also frivolity. If you do it in a stupid way, superficial way, and hypocrisy, claiming the name of God but acting in a different way that disgraces Him. I never really thought of the last two, but it's still implying that God is not overall if we take His name that way. And Jesus taught this same idea in His command in the disciples' prayer in Matthew 6 and 9, when He taught us to have regard for the holiness of God's name. Hallowed be your name. He taught us that God's name is not to be taken in vain. It tells us God will not hold him guiltless who takes His name. The strength of this command has led to strange traditions among the Jewish people. And I think this is kind of interesting. I don't know if you've read, but there's a lot of people that, in the very strict sense, and others, that will not say God, or will not even write God. They'll write G-D. Leave out a letter. That's one reason why they wrote the name of God as Yahweh, because there's no vowels, and really you can't pronounce it. Now we put some A's and E's and H's in there to make it, but they wouldn't even write it, because they believe so much that if they didn't even speak the name of God, that would take care of them. That's kind of carrying the law too far. We need to praise God and praise Him and recognize Him, but we need to be very careful about our words. They're very powerful. We need to be careful of that. Darla, read 8 through 11 on page 12. Starts.
Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work. But the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor any stranger that is within thy gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is, and rested the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and followed it.
So we see God did this for a reason when he gave us the first part of Genesis, and he told us how the world was made. Moses wrote down the words from God that God gave him for Genesis, that he did it in 7 days, and he did it for a specific purpose. People need rest, and we need a time to look to God. That was what the 7 days is. And the seventh day is the Sabbath, the last day, the day of rest. Now, that's, of course, under the law. They took it as the command is to respect the seventh day, which they are calling Saturday, which we understand that. One of the things that they brought up in Sunday school the other day, and some of them didn't know, is that the day, if you go back to what Genesis 1:1 says, and the evening and the morning were the first day. So it starts in the evening and goes to the next day. And their Sabbath day, today, and back then, was Friday at sundown, started the Sabbath, and Saturday at sundown, it ended the Sabbath. Their day is not stuck on the 12 hours. I mean, midnight, like we are. So that way, in doing that, whatever the days is, that's set for 6 days you can work, and that seventh day you can't do any work. You're to rest. It takes place, it kind of goes back to even the manna and things like that. They couldn't do any cooking. They had to cook all the stuff on the 6th day, enough for the 7th day. And here's some more you can go into here, and it talks about the traditions. I'll read this real quick because I thought it was pretty interesting. Ancient rabbis taught that on the Sabbath day a man could not carry something in his right hand or his left hand, across his chest or on his shoulder, but he could carry something with the back of his hand, his foot, his elbow, or in his ear, his hair, or in the hem of his skirt, or in his shoe or sandal. Now I don't know how they get that, but that's what they, okay. So on the Sabbath,
Very challenging.
on Sabbath, Israelites were forbidden to tie a knot, except a woman could tie a knot in her girdle. Okay? And it's, So if a bucket of water had to be raised from a well, an Israelite could not tie a rope to the bucket on the Sabbath, but a woman could tie her girdle to the bucket and pull it up. So, it just...
Oh my gosh.
You
where
can
did
take
find
things,
that?
I know, you can take things a little too far.
I love it.
You got to go with the gist of the story. Yeah. Says, and I don't think it's the same thing as it is today, but says in observant Jewish homes today, one cannot turn on a light, a stove, or a switch on the Sabbath. It is forbidden to drive a certain distance or to make a telephone call. All are carefully regulated by traditions seeking to spell out the law exactly. And I know some of the others, because they think it's work, you can't push an elevator button because that makes electricity and it has to go. There are so many things that you can put to. Just leave it out. And yeah, it's complicated. The people that live in high-rise apartments, what are they going to do? On Sabbath, they ain't going to do nothing.
When we were in Israel, hit the Sabbath, you said that about the elevator. The elevators were put on automatic.
They wouldn't, okay. So it just went up and down and stopped at every floor?
They done it all on their own. You didn't push any buttons.
Well, still, they had to program that. I guess they did it the day before.
I'd love to have a copy of that.
Yep. That's pretty interesting.
Well, it's like anything else, man finds a way to get around and do
Sure.
what he wants.
Sure.
So he
But-
makes his own little laws.
Right.
It also makes you think of a Seventh-day Adventist also.
Well, yeah.
And the Mormon,
There are a lot of people that,
Mennonites and all that,
take
yeah.
it. On page 14 at the top says New Covenant. In the New Covenant, the idea is that there is no Sabbath. Now, we still have a day of rest. Okay, we still need to rest. But every day is the Sabbath. That's what Jesus taught us. He said, since the shadow of Sabbath is fulfilled in Jesus, we are free from keeping any particular day or no day as a Sabbath, as the custom of ancient Israel. So he said that he was Lord of the Sabbath. Jesus did. Because they chided him. They were picking corn and eating it out there because it was a Sabbath. They were doing certain things, and the Sanhedrin didn't like it. And that's one of the things they charged him with. But he told them that, no, you guys are doing, just like the tithing, they was tithing all the smallest, their spices even. Each of the spices that they got, they would tithe part of the spice. But they were taking it so far, but then over here they were missing the whole entire, doing something that they shouldn't be. And that's kind of what it was. So, if you can carry things on your hand on the back of your hand, you're okay. But carrying it like that's not okay. That's crazy. I don't understand that.
You could carry it in your ear.
Oh, earrings, I guess that's where them some people carry those big old I don't know. I don't know where they get it from, but anyway, there's some more things you can read through, but verse 12, would you read that for us, Harold?
Honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee.
To me, I think this is, to some people it's not, I guess, but to me, yeah, you want to honor not only your mother and your father, you want to honor them, but you want to honor your elders too. It's not in there, but they're the ones that brought you up. They're the ones that, now, some people had very bad mothers and fathers. I understand that. But this was back in ancient Israel. We've got to remember, and according to them, they didn't have a whole lot. The family, the father was the patriarch of the family, and what he said went. Now, you go through the history of the Old Testament, and there were a lot of things that, you think, man, they were so, against all. Well, yes, but they were very stringent, but they, going back to where it said the Sabbath, even your hired hands, don't have them working. Don't have your servants working. That was pretty leveling. Okay, I'm serving them fine, but I'm going to go ahead and have my guys work on that day, and I'll still make money. No, that's not right. God said, don't do that either. So, I think as far as being fair, this was fair to everyone at that particular time. Because the Egyptians was making them work all the time. So he had to go back, God had to reset their clock and go back and push them and say, okay, you need to go back the way it was from the very beginning. And here, that's honoring thy fathers and the mothers, so your days may be long upon the land that God giveth you. It says that the honoring is also to prize them, respect them, or reverence them. In the modern day, basically youth is worshipped. The young people is what's worshipped. And old age, today, people are, well, they can't do anything. They're retired. They don't contribute. What are they worth? And that's not right. I'm sorry. That's just not right. They worked their lives hard to raise kids and raise a family, and they contributed all their lives. And the Hebrews were very much understanding of that. A lot of times the family, they stayed in family units, and they, in their houses, that's what I was saying, in their dwellings later on, and even here when they made their tents, they would stay together and take care of their family, even until their old age, until they passed on. Paul tells us this again, and also the Pharisees, let me read that first. Jesus used the way the Pharisees interpreted this commandment as an example how one might keep the law with a limited interpretation, yet violate the spirit of the commandment. We can go back and read that in Matthew 15:3-6. And Paul repeated this same, emphasizing this promise that your days may be long upon the land in Ephesians. Okay, verse 13, Janet?
Thou shalt not kill.
Okay, that's pretty easy for us. The word in Hebrew, there's a distinction between kill and murder in both Hebrew and English. Now, I didn't know this, but you go on down through here and it said in Hebrew, there's 7 different words for killing. And Brother Epperson has said this, I know. He said, actually, that should be saying, thou shalt not murder. And the difference being, it has to be justified. Later on, they give examples of killing. If somebody hacks off your arm for no reason, you have every right to go back and hack their arm off. If they have an eye, you have a very example that tooth for tooth, eye for eye, life for life. And that's in the law. But here it's saying you shouldn't murder, you shouldn't be premeditated, you shouldn't have it in your heart that you're going to go out and kill somebody. Okay? You should, if it's accidental, they give you a way out of it. They said, run to this refuge city. They send up refuge cities. If you're, working with somebody and your handle flies off your axe and hits them in the head and kills them, so their family won't take vengeance upon you, you need to take off and go to the city of refuge, and they're not able to kill you until either those people pass away, or there's a lot of rules on it, and we'll go into it later if we continue on into Numbers and Deuteronomy. But says only 2 words are used in Hebrew as blunt as the order no killing would be in English. They say Hebrew possesses 7 words for killing. If any one of the 7 words could signify murder, where factors of premeditation and intentionality are present, this is the verb. Then it's telling us that you can kill somebody if it's justified. And it goes back to say, okay, if somebody is murdered or killed, then they could go and kill whoever murdered them. Jesus explains this in Matthew 5:21-26, and it prohibits us from hating someone, because we can wish someone dead in our hearts. He continues on and he said, you need to do these things, not just actually killing somebody, but you can kill them in your heart with your words. So says someone may not kill from a lack of courage or initiative, yet his heart or his or her heart is filled with hatred. We can't have that. Jesus pushed it even further, okay? The 7th commandment is, thou shalt not commit adultery. Clearly the act itself is condemned. God allows no justification for the ways that many often seek to justify extramarital sex. It is not to be done, and when it is done, it is sin and it damages. And I'm not going to go through, there's quite a few more, but it tells also the Old Testament and the New Testament. David is a good example. When he committed that adultery, he was reprimanded by the prophet, and he had to repent for that. Here again, in Jesus, when he's teaching on it in Matthew 5, don't even look upon a woman to lust after her. That's the same as committing adultery. The 8th commandment is, thou shalt not steal. This command is another important foundation for human society, establishing the right to personal property. God has clearly entrusted certain possessions to certain individuals, and other people or states are not permitted to take that property without due process of law. We can also steal from God. Malachi tells us that. Where are you robbing God? In tithes and offerings. We can also rob God by refusing to give him ourselves, if we hold out on ourselves, okay, when we know we should be doing something. Paul in 1 Corinthians 6:20 says, for you were bought at a price. Therefore glorify God in your body and your spirit, which are God's. That bought with a price was Jesus Christ. Because of his sacrifice on the cross, He paid that cross, paid that price for us. And what we need to do for him after that, after we accepted him as a Savior, we need to work to hold up our end of the bargain, to try to serve him the best way we can. We're not perfect, but we need to look to him to try to do the best we can. The 9th commandment is, thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. The primary sense of this command has to do with the legal process. It's common to speak in an informal court where what we say is taken seriously and truth or error matters for us and for others. It's sad that in our society today, it's such a sue society. They want to sue everybody. Litigious is the word. Litigate. They want to sue everybody. It used to be when your word, you said something, you'd do it, and you'd stand behind it. Today, that's not the case. We have to have documents, contracts, and all these things that spell out exactly what will happen and what won't happen, and the fine print always kills you type thing. I mean, yeah, you can't read it all, and it's usually in such legalese that you don't understand it anyway. In my job, the last few years that I was doing is we had to read a lot of contracts. That's one of the things I hated, because it's like, can't you make this any plainer? Because it goes back and says Article C, so then you have to go back and see what Article C is, and then paragraph 3D of this one, so you have to go read what that is, and then you have to look up the definition of this one, and they have definitions in the front, and man, by the time you're taking it, you've read that thing probably 50 times, and then you're still not for sure if you know exactly what it's trying to say. And it's just, here we need to, whatever we say, we need to do. That's basically what this commandment is saying. Whatever we say, we need to do. Another form it says here, slander is a lie invented and spread to intend harm. That's the worst form of injury a person can do to another. Compared to what one does this, a gangster is a gentleman, and a murderer is kind because he ends life in a moment with a stroke and a little pain. But the man guilty of slander ruins a reputation which may never be regained and causes lifelong suffering. We'll skip all the way down to the bottom of 18. Thou shalt, the last one, the 10th commandment, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, thou shalt, nor his manservant, nor his maidservant, nor his ox, nor his ass, nor anything that is thy neighbor's. The first 9 commandments focused on things that we do. This last one deals straight with the heart and what it desires. Covet means to pant after. That's what the definition is. The Hebrew words hamad, it says. It is only when misdirected to that which belongs to another that such desire becomes wrong. We can want to excel ourselves, and that's okay. We would like to do better. We'd like to do whatever you want to fill in the blank, like to lose weight, like to do that. But we can't covet what somebody else has or does. Now, these laws that's been given, and you can read through the rest of it, but these laws were given for a purpose, and this wasn't the end of the laws. These were just the 10 that were written in the commandment, in the stone, that God was going to give Moses here in the next chapter of this. Verse 18 says, and all the people saw the thunderings and the lightnings and the noise of the trumpet and the mountain smoking, and when the people saw it, they removed and stood afar off. Now, last week we said, when God came down in the clouds and all this started, the lightnings and it continued. Okay, it continued on and on. So that scared the people off. They wasn't about to get any closer to what, seen would harm them. Verse 19 says, And they said unto Moses, Speak thou with us, and we will hear. But let not God speak with us, lest we die. Once they heard God, they didn't want to hear him anymore. Because that put such a fear in them that they said, okay, you've heard from him, you can deal with him. We'll deal with you. That's because Moses understood where he stood. God approached him first. And from that, he had a relationship with God. That's the same way we need to be. We need to establish a relationship in our lives with God so that when these things start happening, we need to understand that it's, God's he's there doing these things for a purpose. And, we need to be not afraid that we're going to die, because that's what they were afraid that they were. They just needed to put the law down and understand it. So verse 20, And Moses said unto the people, Fear not, for God is come to prove you, and that this fear may be before your faces, that ye sin not. It's a test for them, that they had to understand who God was. They still were having some issues, like we said, when they started complaining with the water and complaining with the food. But this fear speaks of an attitude of reverence and honor. It's what God meant this to be, is what one commentator said. And that's what we need to rever God. Understand that at any time he could, destroy us, take us out. But if we serve him, we have a purpose. So verse 21 says, And the people stood far off, and Moses drew near unto the thick darkness where God was. So Moses came down a little bit, or he was out with them, and he went up into the darkness. And starting at 22, And the Lord said unto Moses, Thou shalt say unto the children of Israel, Ye have seen that I have talked with you from heaven. Ye shall not make gods of silver, neither shall you make unto you gods of gold. And then going on down to 24 too. An altar of earth thou shalt make unto me, and shalt sacrifice thereupon thy burnt offerings, and thy peace offerings, thy sheep and thine oxen. In all places where I record my name, I will come unto thee, and I will bless thee. And if thou wilt make me an altar of stone, thou shalt not build it of hewn stone. For if thou lift up tool upon it, thou hast polluted it. Neither shalt thou go up steps unto mine altar, that the nakedness be not discovered therein. So we're given some additional teachings on this. Okay, you can have an altar, but it needs to be either built. If it's of wood, it's a particular say, but if it's of stone, it needs to be natural stone. Many times we see Abraham, in the earlier Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, those guys were building altars. It was just they'd have a stone here and they'd pull it over. They wouldn't mold it. And it's to say that this altar, I would say natural. It's something that is not built to look at and to say, oh, that's so gorgeous. It's something that's to serve God. God told us to make this, to do a sacrifice on, and that's what we do. It shouldn't have any more real, any more meaning than that. And the stairs, what they said, don't go up any steps. Many of the Egyptian or many of the other gods had a bunch of steps going up to an altar, and is raised up and is all gold, silver, all this other stuff that they did. Well, they didn't want the priests that were going up to make the altar. If you go through, and later on we will, it tells them how to make their robes. They didn't want their underneath to be showing. And that later on brings about that they start wearing underwear. Up until that time, evidently they wasn't wearing any. So these are some of the things, and I'm not gonna go through all the rest, you can read through this, but I thought it was very, interesting, and it's very, brings out a lot more in the Ten Commandments than usually what we see in the movies and stuff, so. Hope you enjoyed it, we'll be back next week with 21.
Hello, Brother Bill, we love you, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, everybody.
Yes, I would like to have a copy of that real funny reading you did.
Which one?